Okay, this screencast has to do with physical development. What we're going to look at is obvious physical changes that take place over time. If we do that, we first have to start with conception. We're going to take a look here from conception to death. And conception, of course, begins at the moment when Mr. Sperm introduces himself to Miss Egg. Now, kind of interesting and kind of scary, but um, when men release, okay, their sperm, they release about 200 million sperm. And folks, all it takes is one of those tiny little microscopic creatures to introduce himself to the egg, and you have conception and pregnancy. So it's kind of a scary thing when you think about that. But that's what happens. Now, first couple weeks after conception, we refer to the fertilized egg as a zygote. And again, that takes place during the first couple weeks. During that time, only about half or maybe even less than half of the zygotes actually survive the first couple weeks. It takes about 10 days before the zygote attaches itself to the uterine wall, and that is the part that then becomes the outer part anyway of the zygote becomes what we call the placenta. And the placenta is the part that will essentially provide nutrients and filter out things basically for the unborn child. After that time period, we go into the embryonic stage. Okay, we refer to the embryo, and this lasts about 6 weeks. During this time period, you can see, the development that's taken place. Heart does begin to beat, and the organs do begin to develop. And then, after about 2 months after pregnancy, we reach the stage of the fetus, and the fetus looks a little bit more human-like. By about 6 months after after conception has occurred, the stomach and the other organs have formed enough to survive outside the mother. Although obviously that's not the goal, or that's not something you really want to happen, but it could. At this time period, the fetus, we know, can hear things. They can also recognize sounds, and they can respond to light. Now, this brings up the whole issue, okay, of teratogens. Okay, um, when the fetus is in the womb, okay, everything, all of the genetics are now complete. As soon as the sperm and the egg meet, that's when genetics are done. Okay, you have the entire hereditary process done at that point. From that point on, we talk about the environment. And teratogens refer to various chemicals that can harm the developing child in the inside the womb at that time. So this could be alcohol, cigarettes, drugs, even various STDs. All of these things can have major negative implications for the developing child. Alcohol. If a mother ingests alcohol at any time during pregnancy, but if she, especially if she's kind of hooked on alcohol, drinking it quite a bit, the more she consumes, the more potential for what we call fetal alcohol syndrome, and that is a devastating thing for the child. To be born with fetal alcohol syndrome leads to retardation and a variety of things, factors that no child should ever have to deal with. That is not an ideal situation at all. Some people think that cigarettes are okay because, after all, how is that going to impact the child? Well, cigarettes are correlated. That's the number one thing correlated with low birth weight for the baby. And the birth weight of the babies that's extremely important. The birth weight, babies that are basically not developed enough. They don't weigh enough. Low birth weight is correlated with mental retardation, with learning disabilities, with a variety of things as well. So any of these things, alcohol, cigarettes, drugs, any of those things need to be totally avoided by the females. Now, one thing that kind of gets me is that a lot of females will make, sometimes you'll hear the comment that, oh, I'm drinking tonight, but, or I'm smoking tonight, or I do these drugs now, but if I ever get pregnant, I'm going to stop. Well, the thing is, you don't know when you're going to get pregnant. Okay, you never know for sure if a female is sexually active in any way, shape, or form, pregnancy could occur. And in many cases, most women are not going to know for at least several weeks, if not months, before they, after conception, until they actually know for sure that they're pregnant. So it can happen that way. Females need to avoid these things for sure. Now, this gets us to the point where we talk about newborns. And one of the first things that newborns can actually control are their eyes. Research shows us that within about 45 minutes after birth, newborns can track various objects with their eyes, especially if they're colorful, if they're bright, if they're shiny. They can track those things with their eyes. They don't have clear vision at that point in time, but they can at least track things. The other thing we've noticed research-wise is that, kind of interesting, if you look at the two pictures at the bottom of this screen, the one on the left looks a little bit more human-like than the one on the right. And it's kind of interesting because infants, after birth, they will gaze at those types of pictures for longer time periods than they do things that don't appear to be human. Now this leads us to one other thing we'll talk about is maturation. And maturation refers to the idea that a child, anybody, has to be physically mature enough to be able to do a particular task before teaching is really going to have any kind of a major impact. So, for example, one of my older brothers was 10 years older than I was when I was born, and when I was 3, 4, 5 months of age, he used to play on the floor with me and pretend that he was teaching me to walk. Now, he thought that that was working. He thought that he was actually teaching me that. In reality, infants don't really learn to walk until around 9 months of age. Some maybe as early as 8, but basic thing to remember here, until a child is physically mature enough to do a task, you could teach all day long, for week after week, and it's not going to have any impact because the maturity's not there yet. It's like climbing stairs. Usually children have to be around a year of age before they're able to actually crawl up and down stairs safely. Okay, let's put it that way. But you can try and teach those kind of things earlier, but they usually don't have any major impact. Now, when we talk about at some point what we call critical time periods of development, or just a critical period, that's a time period when something's most easily learned. So when we talk about that with maturation, if a child is mature enough to do a task, then if you can match up the teaching, then you've basically got a critical time period. That's when you can very easily teach a variety of things. The other thing in terms of physical development we'll look at here is puberty, and puberty tends to be a very obvious stage that adolescents tend to go through. The landmark for each, for girls it's first menstruation, for boys first ejaculation. Many, many years ago, and I'm talking literally 50 to 100 years ago, most kids didn't hit puberty until around age 13. Nowadays, kids are hitting puberty, some as early as 10 or 11 years of age. And we believe, at least, that those things are due to better nutrition, better health care, a variety of things that kids are getting nowadays that we weren't very good at years ago. For girls, first menstruation, the magic number for that tends to be around 110 pounds. When a female gets to about that weight, that tends to be the time period of first menstruation. That's not 100% correct, but for most females, that's gives you a good idea anyway. And during this time period, obviously, both boys and girls go through and begin developing this, what we call the secondary sexual characteristics. For boys, things like body hair and deeper voice. Girls, widening of the hips and breast development. Now, this brings us to talking more about physical development through adulthood. Physical development we tend to get better and better at things until we hit the mid to late 20s. And at that time, things begin to go downhill, unfortunately. If you watch professional athletes, you'll notice that when they hit their late 20s or into the 30s, they tend to get a little bit slower, they don't jump as high, things of that nature, and their skills begin to decline. And it's very, very rare to see professional athletes, anyway, that are still, competing at age 40 or thereabouts. This brings us to the last thing that we'll talk about in this stage, or in this one, and that is the stages of impending death. Okay? Elizabeth Kubler-Ross came up with a theory that has to do with people who go through impending death, meaning, for example, older adults or anyone really who have been given a certain time period that they've got left to live. So somebody gets sick and they're told they have 6 months to live or something of that nature. They go through a variety of stages. Now, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross referred to these as stages, and stages tend to imply to people that you go through the first stage, then the second, then the third, and so on. Now, I will tell you she's been criticized widely for that because there's no real proof that people go through these stages necessarily in that order. And some people may not get through all of these stages at all. But let's talk about them real quick. First thing that most people tend to do is denial. So, for example, a doctor or somebody tells them they have 6 months to live, they tend to not believe it. Okay, they don't believe it, they deny it, they kind of shut it out. Almost everybody goes through this, and it tends to be kind of a temporary shock that they go through. Second, we talk about anger, and people get angry at a variety of people for different reasons. They may get angry at the doctor or the nurse who gave them the news. They may get angry at God because, why did God choose me for this to happen to? They even may be angry at other people because they're envious that the other people don't have to deal with this. Third thing is bargaining. This tends to be kind of a brief stage, at least according to Kubler-Ross. People will kind of go through the spell where, if I can only live till Christmas, then, I'll be okay with things. And it's kind of a personal thing a lot of times between that person and God. And then fourth is depression. Now, depression is really involved in a variety of these, and has to deal with depression of things that maybe they haven't done in the past, or depression of things they're not going to get to do in the future. And then lastly is acceptance. And again, not everybody goes through this. This is not a happy stage by any stretch, but basically it's a time period when a person kind of gives up and they accept the fact that this is going to happen.